Hi QCon Plus, it's good to be here. My name's Matthew Skelton and I'm here with my co-author Manuel Pais.
Hi, I'm Manuel.
We're co-authors of this book here, Team Topologies, published by IT Revolution Press, September 2019. And we're very pleased with how the book's gone since publication. Charles Betts from Forrester Research described the book as innovative tools and concepts for structuring the next generation digital operating model. Let's have a look at what we want to share today. We want to talk through what is business agility, the importance of being agile, not doing agile, the value of a product mindset, and then Manuel will share with you some examples of organizations using Team Topologies to help achieve business and technical agility. First, very quickly, how does Team Topologies help with business and technical agility? The Team Topologies encourages decoupling of business concepts to help the organization more responsive. Patterns from Team Topologies help to turn blocking compliance checks into self-service, flow-aligned, API-driven checks. Crucially, Team Topologies is partly a sense-making approach to help organizations gain situational awareness and therefore agility in the kind of wider business context. And Team Topologies also helps the organization to focus tightly on its core mission via these streams and limiting team cognitive load. We'll look in more detail about all of these now. First off, let's just remind ourselves what we mean by business agility. Our point of view, it's the ability to respond rapidly to changing internal and external conditions. And when we say respond rapidly, that's within hours. Something happens outside in the regulatory context or business context, we can change, we can make a change and make something happen. Or internally, likewise. Why is this important? What's driving this? The remote first new way of working, particularly ushered in since the pandemic. But actually this was a trend that was happening sort of over time anyway. The pandemic has kind of brought it forward. The speed of change in technology, in climate, in geopolitical relationships, these are only increasing. We need to be able to respond to these external situations within our organization. And of course, there's global and local competition, which is increasing. We need to be able to respond to that as well. What do we mean by this word digital though? There's actually three components to this. There's rapidly developed services that are accessed by personal compute devices, mobile phone, laptop, whatever. There's the telemetry for existing processes that are provided by software and sensors. And telemetry is a second dimension to this. And then finally, there's highly effective ways of working that we discover from these first two things. And it's a combination of these rapidly developed application services for compute devices. It's the telemetry that goes along with them and these highly effective ways of working. And that gives us organizational agility, this business agility that we're looking for. The kind of questions that we should be asking ourselves if we're heading towards true business agility are these. How would we optimize for a fast flow of change through the organization? How would we make sure we focus on user needs? How would we produce the right thing in the right way at the right time? How would we easily course correct when we need to adjust? And how would we maximize our chances of finding new opportunities for innovation? These are all the kind of questions that we should be asking if we're looking to achieve real business agility. And part of that is about being agile, not doing agile. So what do we mean by that? Sounds easy, but let's have a little look. The great thing is, particularly since the state of DevOps reports have been published over the last few years, that we now have a strong body of evidence that points us in the right direction. So going back to 2013 at least, and more recently, surveys of over 31,000 IT professionals worldwide over many years. And this is an independent view into the practices and capabilities that drive high performance. Crucially, the four key metrics that we'll look at in a minute that were identified by the State of DevOps report and the Accelerate book as being strong predictors of high organizational performance. A whole set of practices that are also kind of identified and essential to make this stuff work. But in particular, these 4 key metrics from the Accelerate book. The authors of the Accelerate book, of course, being some of the authors of the State of DevOps reports. Lead time it takes from a change to go into production. Deployment frequency, how often we deploy. Mean time to restore, the average time it takes to restore a live production service after an outage, and the percentage of changes to live services that fail. And by optimizing for these 4 and a couple of other things, we start to head towards business agility by improving our technical practices. So business agility is underpinned and supported by technical agility and good technical practices. So just quickly, some of these include things like we make sure we're getting fast feedback from deployment pipelines, things like test-driven development, making sure we've got team ownership of software and services, crucially making sure we've got configuration in version control, expecting our services and software to be very transparent in operation, so kind of observability, ability to see what's going on inside. We're designing these systems for automation, not for kind of humans to click around. And we're making sure that we're realigning our architecture for a fast flow of change. Some people call this flow architecture. There's a book that's recently come out. But the principle there is we cannot just expect our existing software architectures to remain the same and have a fast flow of change. We need to realign this architecture. Some practices that seem to work well in this space to help us get this business agility are domain-driven design and the ideas that come out of DDD. And this is, in a few words, untangling business concepts to enable a faster flow of change. There's a lot more to it than that, but that's one of the main benefits that we see from organizations adopting DDD. Now we can combine DDD with something called Wardley mapping, which is there to increase situational awareness and to help us apply the right kind of techniques in different situations. Should we build it? Should we rent it? Should we buy it? What's the right place to invest our effort and energy based on what's happening in the technological and business landscape? And other organizations are also combining these 2 practices, so DDD with Wardley mapping, and they're adding on Team Topologies. Team Topologies with its focus on fast flow of change, rapid feedback from live systems, the way in which teams interact can be used as a signal. The evolution of the organization and the evolution of the team structures and interrelationships is a key theme in Team Topologies, and of course things like limiting team cognitive load to enable a rapid flow of change. And the combination of these 3 things seems to be very effective for organizations and really helping them to become more, have greater business agility. Diving in a little bit more quickly then into some of the key themes around Team Topologies. We start with the principle we need a rapid flow of change in the organization. And this is a rapid flow of software changes to our software systems. And these days, of course, the vast majority of tech, if you like, in the organization that's building modern systems is going to be software driven. We've got infrastructure as code and so on. We're driving everything through software principles and software practices. It's not just good enough, though, to have a rapid flow of change towards production. We need rapid feedback from these running systems to enable us to course correct. A key principle in Team Topologies is that handovers from one group to another can kill that flow of change. If we've got multiple groups all in the flow of change, that really slows down how quickly we can make changes through to the live systems. So we need to remove these handovers. And that's why we've got our starting point as a streamlined team, end-to-end responsibility for a particular part of the business domain, usually. And they get that rapid feedback from live systems. The streamlined team then is supported by 3 other types of team: enabling team, complicated subsystem team, and platform team. And these 3 supporting team types are there primarily to limit or reduce the cognitive load on this streamlined teams to enable a rapid flow of change. It's not just about types of team, though. We need to think about the ways in which they interact. Just as any kind of system or complex adaptive system even, we need to think about the ways in which different parts, different bits of the system interact. And that's why we've got interaction modes in Team Topologies. Collaboration, 2 teams working together for a defined period of time to achieve a specific outcome. X as a service, 1 team providing, 1 team consuming something. Low friction, scales well. and facilitating, one team helping another team to do something or bridge a capability gap. And it's a combination of team types and team interaction modes that enables us to listen to the signals inside the organization and evolve how we work to increase our business agility. This is a diagram from the book, and it shows a kind of a snapshot of a small part of the organization at a particular point in time, representing different kind of activities happening in order to achieve certain ends. It's an example diagram. A key idea in Team Topologies is to track dependencies and separate them in terms of whether they're blocking dependencies or non-blocking. So software has all kind of dependencies at multiple different levels. That's how we're able to build these kind of systems. But the crucial thing is your dependency, does it block you from making a change? Does it block the flow of change? Or can you simply self-serve and consume that capability? So we need to split. We need to be conscious of these different kinds of dependencies, blocking versus non-blocking, and obviously aim towards making more and more of our dependencies non-blocking so that teams are able to self-serve and have a rapid flow of change. So if we have these barriers to flow, handoffs, approval gates, manual inspections, and so on, we need to be aiming to replace with self-service APIs for teams that use them. And this, of course, presents a bit of a challenge to, particularly in the compliance space, from a mode of permitting change to flow through the organization towards enabling change to flow quickly. And that's a huge mindset shift that we've seen with lots of organizations that we've worked with. So this is the question in this context: what would be needed for us to be compliant with security or finance or personal identifiable information rules with multiple decoupled rapid flows of change? And it kind of starts with self-service APIs, really. So let's have a brief look at the value of a product mindset and how that can help with business agility. Marty Cargan, who's part of the Silicon Valley product group, identified a product as a kind of holistic user experience: functionality, design, monetization, and content. So let's think about product. If I walk into a city centre or shopping centre and there are some running shoes in a shop, am I forced to buy those running shoes? No, I can choose to buy them. That's a product. So product is optional to use. No one's forced to use the product. Product is also carefully designed and curated. The experience of that product is curated. So another key aspect of what makes something a product, the thinking and kind of care that's gone into it to make it work really well. A product also simplifies something for users. This is a photograph of a machine that I took, an early jukebox machine. It's actually sitting in the pier in San Francisco. And you put a quarter, 25 cents in there, and it plays a tune. At the time when this came out, this is like an early version of Spotify. It simplified my life. It means I don't have to carry around a whole stack of 7-inch singles or whatever it was at the time. So product simplifies something for its users. The product also expects to evolve, to take advantage of changing technology and the changing kind of ecosystem. These are all aspects that make a product good. We've got a strong focus on user needs driving good software. We're trying to take these principles of good products and applying it to software inside our organization, particularly for situations where the users of our products are internal. This applies where we've got kind of internal software that is being consumed by internal users. We need to think about the experience of those people. We can say the software should kind of get out of the way. We need to design for usability. This is where it's really important for us to apply product management techniques for internal platforms. So let's return to these kind of product principles and see how this applies to an internal platform. So here's my running shoe example again. It should be optional for me to use this product. So that means the platform is optional to use. No team is forced to use it. Internal platform teams should effectively use internal marketing techniques advocate for their platform product and market it to internal teams who are going to use it. So using things like user personas, user experience, actually going to talk to these teams and see what they need. The purpose of this internal platform should be to reduce the cognitive load on teams that are using it to enable them to have a fast flow of change. And that's one important route to achieving real true business agility. In this context, a platform is a curated experience for engineers, the customers of the platform. And now Manuel is going to take you through some examples of organizations using Team Topologies and using some of these principles that we've just had a look at.
Thank you, Matthew. So exactly, I'm going to talk through two examples in particular that highlight the ideas of business and technical agility that Matthew has been talking about. So we have a number of case studies. Some of them were already included in our book. Companies like Adidas, IBM, TransUnion, applying some of the patterns that we talk about in the book, which now provides a more kind of holistic view, a more kind of cohesive view on the practices and patterns and approaches to organizational evolution that works well for many organizations that are looking for more agility. So it's been now about 20 months since the book was published, and we have some more examples that we've been publishing on the website. So there are many companies adopting the ideas in Team Topologies in order to achieve higher agility. These are some of them. There are many others that we can't disclose at the moment, but we've worked with or we've talked with, including across many industries, banking, government as well, telecom, healthcare, and so on. So it's really quite agnostic to industry because all of these organizations these days are mostly driven by software, right? Software products, software services. So one of those organizations is Food Asylum. I'm guessing at least people in the UK will be quite familiar with this company. For others, they are relatively recent, about 15 years they've been around. They grew very quickly. So this is they had physical stores for footwear, and now they have obviously a strong online presence, and they have 2,500 employees more or less. And so what's interesting here is to know that in 2019 they really came up with some major challenges to their agility. So they started small, and they were, obviously at that moment was quite easy to make changes. As they grew and they kind of expanded into different regions of the world, they had more teams, and they started to see a lot of fragmentation. They had teams essentially aligned to their geography, development teams in the UK, product management team in the UK as well, and then other teams in Romania, India, but mostly aligned in a functional way, if you like. And so this was causing a lot of difficulties to actually have a product mindset and be able to make changes quickly. And so even before Team Topologies came out, they were looking at what are the actual streams of work that we have inside the organization. What are the business segments that we actually need to align our teams to so that we can have that sort of higher business agility. And they combined this with wordly mapping. They also came up, they found the book Team Topologies, and they were also combining that with wordly mapping, as Matthew mentioned earlier, so that you could have not just a view of what are their streams of work, their products, what is the platform that they need internally, but also how they expect this to evolve over time. What is the strategy in terms of what should we build, what should we buy or rent, and how do we expect these things to evolve over time. Another quite interesting approach they had in terms of especially this technical agility is that they've been thinking about the platform as a minimum viable product, if you like. So we call this thinnest viable platform in the book. So essentially trying to keep their internal platform as small and simple as possible. So they have one example which is quite interesting where they needed a service with the locations of physical stores, right? So they first thought, we're going to need an API with a database behind it, and a kind of standard service. But then they realize actually this is data that's almost static. It changes very infrequently, and so maybe all that we need is a version control data file, and that's what they did, and they haven't changed that approach. So they really took this idea of let's start small, see what is the minimum we need, and then evolve over time, rather than start big, make a lot of kind of complicated design up front, and then realize if that's needed or not. So they kept this idea of agility also within their internal platform. The clarity in terms of the types of teams and the interactions between teams also helped them, especially because they started from the idea that if we want fast flow, if we want this agility, being able to respond quickly, we shouldn't expect the teams to be static and never change. And we should expect to identify when different teams will need to interact, when maybe we need an enabling team to help address some capability gaps. Maybe we need some new services in the platform to address some aspects of the life cycle that teams need help with. So essentially, they're using the interactions between teams to actually evolve and think about what do we need to do next to keep being agile, both internally in the platform and in their products to the external customers. So the ideas they took from Team Topologies that work well include this focus on the streams of work, on what are the actual business domains that should be more or less decoupled, or actually highly decoupled, so that we can evolve them independently. Keeping the platform as simple and viable as possible, evolving the team's interactions and combining with Worldly Map. So we have an idea, strategical view of what we expect to become more of a commodity over time, or what do we expect to become some new products possibly that we will be developing. Thank you to Paul Martin and Andy Norton for sharing this example and their experience with us. And the second case study is from YouSwitch. So again, for people in the UK, they'll be quite familiar. Probably they're a comparison website for mostly comparing home utilities like internet providers, electricity providers, making it easy to change. There are two aspects that are quite interesting here. Around 2010, they started moving towards autonomous teams, and we're talking here about truly autonomous teams. So each of these teams that you can see here were aligned to one of these utilities that I mentioned. So there was one team, for example, focused on the energy providers comparison and making that available to customers. And this idea of autonomy was quite extended. So these teams would make all sorts of decisions around infrastructure, around which tools they wanted to use, as well as kind of the experiments around the product and how to evolve it. And this worked quite well for a period of time for them. But as they grew and as their services became more complicated, they realized, and actually Paul Ingalls, the CTO, wrote about this, how they were having more and more cognitive load, more and more aspects of, in this case, in using AWS services that they had to keep in mind in order to make any sort of change. So they were actually, because of the high cognitive load, they were limited in the agility and the speed that they were able to change things. And Paul Ingalls said they were tracking actually the direct AWS API calls at that time. So this is circa 2015. And they were seeing a steady increase as the services got more complicated. And so this was actually sort of a proxy, if you like, for how much cognitive load each of these teams had, because they had to deal with all this complexity, all these services that they were using directly from AWS. And so what he realized, Paul Ingalls, is that people were spending too much time interacting with low-level services and spending their time on low-value decisions compared to high-level kind of user-focused decisions. They introduced a platform for making it easier to have cloud infrastructure services, which were aligned with the needs of the internal teams. And over time, they saw as the adoption of this platform grew, it wasn't mandated, like Matthew said earlier, because it was seen as an internal product, not something that everyone had to use. But as platform adoption grew, they actually saw this direct AWS calls, the number going down significantly. And again, this was kind of a proxy they were using to understand the load on teams in terms of low-level infrastructure. And then this evolved to other platforms that they have today. But this was very much based on internal needs of the teams, not an upfront design of this is our big platform that we're going to strive for. It was actually driven by internal needs and basically what the internal market, if you like, was asking from the platform teams. I actually spoke last year at QCon on Kubernetes and the fact that it's a foundation to such an internal platform like they have at YouSwitch. There's now an article based on that talk. So if you're interested, I go into a lot more detail around what makes a good platform adoption metrics, and so on. To sum up this case study, Paul basically wanted the teams to organize around these principles, which we are very familiar with in engineering around loosely coupling, highly cohesive systems, but now applied to teams as well. And so Team Topologies helped them and provided the language to talk about that. They look at the platform as a curated experience, so an internal product that helps reduce complexity for teams. And they actually move from this idea of fully autonomous teams to the idea that, well, there are some dependencies on the platform team, but because it's based on self-service, those dependencies are not blocking. They're actually helping those teams accelerate and reducing cognitive load. Thank you, Tom Booth and Paul Ingalls, for sharing this with us as well. And very quickly, to sum up what we've seen today, we said that business and technical agility is really about responding rapidly to changing external and internal conditions. We need to have situational awareness, clarity of business purpose, good technical practices, and local decisions to actually be agile. Having a product mindset means we're focusing strongly on user needs, user experience, viability of the product and services, etc. And we looked at a couple of real-world examples of applying these ideas. And so Team Topologies helps with this approach and this intent of increased business and technical agility by encouraging the decoupling of business concepts to start with, to make the organization more responsive, move from blocking compliance and all kinds of checks into self-service that promotes fast flow and decoupled streams through APIs. Team Topology is also about making sense of where we are today and how the organization can gain more awareness and therefore agility and move faster organizationally as well. And helps focus on the mission of the organization with streams and limiting cognitive load. Very quickly, we have a number of free resources on our websites, as well as the industry examples that we talked about and more. We have a couple infographics if you want to share kind of the key principles or ideas we talked about today and are in the book. There's an upcoming Team Topologies Academy where we'll have on-demand training for people who want to go more in depth. And there's a partner program we're starting. So if you're interested, you can get in touch through this email. You can sign up for news and tips on our website as well. And with that, I wrap up and I thank you for your time and I hope you found the presentation useful.
Thank you very much, everyone. Bye.
Fantastic talk. I love it. I was typing so quick or writing so quickly. I'm old school. And obviously, like, wow, what a great set of questions in the chat. So let's just go with them. And I'll curate a little bit. So Fabio asks about customer centricity, right? Like being focused on the customer, and when there are business units that like are doing different things like in parallel to the customer? What's an opportunity for IT maybe or Team Topologies to influence that?
So it's a really good question, and I think this relates to what are the most important kind of domains in the business, if you like. So sometimes it's useful to have a fast flow of change aligned to different products, but sometimes that actually goes against the what's actually good for the customer, what's actually good for the business. So that speaks to kind of maybe rethinking some of the ways in which the organization has got things aligned. And maybe rethinking what a product means. Sometimes we actually want to give the impression of a product that's somewhat larger, maybe. And so you might kind of adjust the internal boundaries and how the work flows through the organization so that you're meeting those customer needs in a different way. Alternatively, you might keep the separate products separate, keep those products separate as they currently are, or something similar, but actually have what we would call a platform. But it would be a design platform. It would be like a user experience platform, which would help multiple teams to meet the needs of customers in terms of their user experience without having to think so much about it, without having to be so aware of all the UX details. And so what we've got, instead of like data or an infrastructure platform, we've got a platform that's focused on design or user experience, which then offloads a lot of that cognitive load away from teams. And maybe that platform has a load of kind of templates or examples or ways of doing things that help to get a coherent customer experience without coupling the architecture and the flows of change.
So I mentioned in the chat the book Designing Delivery by Jeff Susna, where I think there are, if you like, different levels that you can look at this. Obviously, there's design of your application services, there's the user experience, and there's also what Jeff calls the promises that you're making to your customers. So that can be even beyond just a common, recognizable user experience. Is actually what are we promising in terms of how we behave with the customers, and things that should be consistent across multiple products, if at least you're marketing them as coming from the same brand, right? So inside a large organization might have different brands, and then they're sort of separate in terms of how they what they promise to customers. So it's a really interesting book. I recommend reading that. But specifically in Team Topologies, we talk about service experience teams as having that sort of sense of how different products or services that we offer, how they interact, and how do we make that experience more consistent.
Great. Wow. Fantastic. Cool. So the next question was around sort of the difference between platform teams and enabling teams. I'm sure you get this question a lot, and you've made clear the distinction, but I think like maybe a set of examples, or like platform teams are about providing this type of service and enabling are about these others, just so people have that in their heads.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I can see where the question is coming from. We were really keen to separate platform from an enabling team because they have two very different sets of behavior. Platform, the typical kind of behaviors or ways of interacting within the organization from a platform is the platform is providing a service. That's its kind of principal way of interacting with other teams. It's there to offload some of the cognitive load in other teams that are using the platform. It's there to help encourage a fast flow of change through teams that are using the facilities in the platform. And so the primary thing we're doing when we're working in the platform is providing services that just work really well. They've got a good user experience or developer experience. They're friction-free and so on. That's our focus. However, the focus in an enabling team is very different. The focus in an enabling team is to bridge capability gaps inside teams that we're working with, to help those teams understand new technologies, or to migrate from one technology to another, or to adopt a new way of working, whatever. And so there's two very, very different ways of working. Now, clearly, if you've got some skilled people in the organization, this week they can be building something in the platform, and maybe next week they can be acting as part of an enabling team, helping someone understand new technologies around machine learning or something. But we wanted to draw the distinction because it's two very different ways of working, and we wanted to make it super clear that there's value in characterizing the different ways of working so that we can set expectations. And if we've got expectations about how that interaction will feel when we're working with a different kind of team, then if something isn't working about that interaction, we can actually detect it much easier, much more quickly, and say, hey, there's something not quite right here. This doesn't feel right. So that was part of is to gain some clarity about the purpose of different kinds of activity, different kinds of interaction within inside the organization.
It's also a little bit about maintaining expectations between teams, right? So if you have someone working a platform team, and let's say you are doing some enabling work, helping another team learn about monitoring or what have you, and you get a call that you need to do support because there's a problem with the platform service, that's not going to be a good experience, right? The other team was expecting you to be there to enable them, to help them, and now you have to go and answer to some incident or something else, or a person in platform team is developing, working on coding and creating some new functionality, but now you have to, you're being asked to do some support work. So the more you kind of put on the shoulders, if you like, of the platform teams, also the more cognitive load they have, the harder it's going to be to respond effectively. And also, the enabling teams can have much broader domains than a platform service, right? So if you think, I mentioned in the chat, regulations, GDPR for people familiar with data privacy regulations in the EU, user experience, where often organizations don't have enough experts in user experience to meet the needs of all the teams. So these are areas which you don't necessarily have platform services to start with, at least, and where enabling actually makes a lot of sense. Sometimes you might need to do some enabling, be more of an enabling team for a period of time, just to get teams kind of up to improve their skills around some domain, and then start focusing more on platform. That all this said, I also want to, pragmatically, we've seen examples where clients say, well, we don't have effort available to create an enabling team. So you might have to start with, let's do a bit of enabling work, maybe dedicate one person in the platform team for a period of time, but it's not very sustainable in the long run. But it might be a starting point.
Yeah, I love that example, and we're running out of time. So I guess I'll first encourage everybody to continue on in the speaker area after this, which I hope you guys, Matthew and Manuel, will be able to join. But yeah, excellent questions. The platform is about an API, but then how do you have an API around a user experience thing? And then I really love, Manuel, your sort of you can iterate your way, where hey, I start by enabling, and maybe that's the way I even develop a platform.
We see that often,
and with a pilot and an embedding model. Anyway, fantastic talk, fantastic Q&A. Let's continue the conversation.
Great. Thanks everyone.
Thank you, Randy.
See you.
Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone.